I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Center for Latin American Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, and the Consulate of Colombia. We are very pleased to be here this afternoon. I'm Harley Shaken. I'm the chair of the Center for Latin American Studies. And Colombia, as you all know, is truly an exceptional country in terms of its people, its culture, its history, its geography, its economy. It is both varied, diverse, and unique. It is a critical country in its own right. It is an important part of Latin America, and it has an important relationship with the United States. For all of these reasons, we are very pleased to be welcoming Luis Carlos Villegas, Colombia's ambassador to the United States. He has pursued a long and distinguished career, both in the public sector and in the private sector. Most recently, he served as president of the National Business Association of Colombia. He's had a number of important diplomatic posts. He's been ambassador to the United States since November of last year, and he's also been part of the peace process with the discussions that are now going on. He is speaking, I think, on an unusually critical topic. And once again, a critical topic for Colombia, but very much for the rest of Latin America, and certainly for the United States. He's going to be speaking about the new Colombia and the peace process. After his talk, we will have time for questions and comments. I'd also like to welcome the Consul General of Colombia, Ilse Bechara, who's also with us today, and Carmela Restrepo, the wife of the ambassador, and other distinguished guests who are with them. So let me turn it over to Ambassador Villegas.
Thank you very much, Professor. You, as the head of the Latin American program, maybe feel the very weird, strange coincidence of having two Colombians in this podium in 24 hours. The big difference is that 15 years ago, two Colombians here in 24 hours brought the word emergency to the minds of everybody. Now the word is interest. That's part of the big change we have suffered. For me, it's a great privilege, first and all, an honor and a privilege to be at Berkeley, be at the program for Latin American Studies, and to address an audience that I never thought was going to be this big in the middle of the exams. So thank you very much for coming. And what I propose to you is to give you a wider picture of what is going on in Colombia nowadays. And in the economy, in politics, what has the change been in this first 14 years of the century? And then move to the peace process, the state of the art in that topic. Then my own view on what's the path forward for my country. And then, as Professor said, we will open to comments and questions. Hopefully, I will have the answers to them. So let's start. I've been coming to Washington for, let's say, 38 years. In many responsibilities, private sector, politician, as a public servant, for vacation. And I feel that in those 38 years, 35 were to give an explanation about something that happened, that was happening, or that we were trying that wouldn't happen in Colombia. And I see in the last 5 4 years that the perception of the US society about Colombia has improved as fast as facts in Colombia. That's not very common. Generally, perception comes behind facts, for good or for bad. In this occasion, the good change, the change for better things that has happened in Colombia has been followed by a positive perception in the United States, in every single aspect of the American life. I've been in Washington for almost 6 months, and I find in the executive branch, in Congress, in the media, in the NGOs that were so critical 15 years ago, a positive comment, a positive point of reference that Colombia has become in public policies, in economics, in security, in human rights, in labor market, in trade, in investment, in rule of law, and so on. So it makes me very proud first, but very happy, because we Colombians are not used to be a source of good news. That's a new feeling for Colombians. And I see many Colombians here that are young. They probably say, what is this guy talking about? Because they have lived years of improvement. Those of the 80s, of the 90s, where we had all the threats a democracy can have at its doors, like isolation, poverty, non-growth, inequality, non-participation of people in public decisions, not openness to the world in trade, in investment, in thoughts, and infiltration of the organized crime in government. That is far behind. That is far behind. And we could come from there to the modern country I'm going to describe because of a very hard work of Colombians. Maybe 2 generations of Colombians that worked hard but also put their lives at stake, their budgets at stake, their families at stake, their jobs at stake. In the public force we have had policemen and soldiers that have died by the thousands in the last decades. But that internal work has been accompanied also by a friend that in 1909, when nobody wanted to know anything about Colombia, raised its hand and said, I'm here to help. That was the United States of America. And we had Plan Colombia in 99 with the best results in security any foreign policy issue in the United States can be showed. So the Colombians are thankful to the US cooperation and company, and Americans should be proud of what Colombia has achieved because the change for good has been possible, because also to the US help. I'll give you some figures so you can compare where we were in the beginning of the century and where are we now. We were in 2000 the economy number 7 by size of GDP. We are, as we speak, number 3. I have an Argentinian guide here in first row that would go to Google to find out if Argentina is number 4 or number 3. The truth is that the GDP of Colombia has passed Argentina's GDP. We are number 3. And it was something unthinkable 10 years ago. Our GDP per capita moved from $2,500 per Colombian to almost $9,000 nominal per Colombian in power parities that is around $12,000. That's a huge change. We used to have in 2000 60% of our population under the line of poverty. Inflation was below 2%. And that's a big achievement with an independent central bank and very professional treatment of the macroeconomics. Foreign trade has also multiplied several times. It moved from $30 billion at the beginning of the century to $120 billion this year. The US is our main partner with 40 billion out of those 120 billion. And with the FTA, I think it will increase even more in the near future. Our unemployment has gone down from 13% to 9% and going below 9% in the next month. We have seen almost 7% by 3 or 4 months of last year's. So it's a real new Colombia, a real new context for living there, for young people there. I was telling our Consul General here that in the places I've visited in these months, I always try to see most of the Colombian community there. I've been to Florida, to Chicago, to New Jersey and New York, and I find that at least a fourth of the Colombians I have seen want to go back, or have decided to go back. Even those that have kids that were born in the US, that those also want to go back. And my question is always, why would you like to go back? Because I find that I have opportunities there. Opportunities of a job, opportunities of starting my own enterprise, of things I have learned in the United States, mostly services, because my kids feel they have access to universities over there, programs of education. That's what I have found. This afternoon we have the contact with the Colombians in this part of California. Let's see what happens there. We have an elite of Colombians that live in San Francisco. So the change touches every single point of the daily life in our country. We are not a perfect country, far from that. We still have problems with our justice system that is old. I have here students, law students, I will give an opinion of what I'm going to say. Our law is old, is old-fashioned, too many processes and too many lawyers in the middle. I'm one of them. Don't worry. So I think it has to be refurbished to more agile procedures, where justice that is closer to the citizen. Structural things and reforms like that are ahead of us. But the will of change is still there. The Colombian society maintains its commitment with reform. And that's very important for the future. We also have, let's assume that we have decided as a country to become a developed country, that it will take a generation, 20, 25 years from now. What has to be done to do that? Well, you have to reform your justice, yes, of course. But you have also to end your internal conflict. That's a condition. We have gained the highest levels of security in the last 8 to 10 years in our history. In our history, we have had a very violent history. We have now those levels in the best, those levels of insecurity, of violence, in the best levels ever. But still, you have pockets in the Colombian territory where there's still violence. There is still organized crime, still illicit crops, still FARC, still ELN, bandas criminales. You have to get rid of that to become a developed country. You have to deal with it. You have to improve the capacity of your citizens in every single spot of the map to solve their controversies peacefully. So we are in the middle of 3 things that happened that helped President Santos to take the decision of negotiating. First, the balance in the military. It's in favor of the government, it's in favor of the state, and we think inexorably in favor of the state. The fuel for financing violence in Colombia, that is illicit crops, came down from 200,000 hectares in 2000 to less than 30,000 hectares last December. and moving down dramatically to 20,000 hectares or 15,000 hectares in the next year. Imagine a business where you move from 200,000 hectares of cash flow to 1/10 of that. It produces consequences in the finance of the illegal armed groups, of course. Second reason, when President Betancourt in '84 started a negotiation process, when President Pastrana tried a negotiation in 2000, in many places of Europe and in some places in the United States and Canada, those groups were freedom fighters. They are now illustrious members of the terrorist lists. In the United States, in Canada, in Europe, in Brazil, in China, or in Japan. What I want to say by this is that the international support to those groups is gone. It's not there anymore. Not only politically, from the lips, but also from the pockets and the public budgets of many countries and organizations. And number three, FARC has found on the table a different Colombia, the new Colombia I have described. The new Colombia that could face social programs successfully, that could face insecurity successfully, that could grow at 5%, that could move poverty from 60 to 30%, things like that, that really leave FARC with no option than negotiating. And I think that's a good news. It doesn't mean that the process is easy, short, inexpensive. No, no, no. It's very hard, very expensive, and long. But my feeling as a veteran of other negotiations in '84 and in 2000 is that finally this organization has no option. That's negotiating. So those three things have brought Mr. Santos to take the decision to negotiate, and to negotiate in Havana with the support of the government of Venezuela, the support of the government of Norway, of the Cubans, and of the government of Chile. We started the secret phase of that 3 years ago, the public phase of that almost 2 years ago, and what have we achieved? First, 2 points of agreement. One on rural development, another, the second one, on political participation. On rural development, we agreed a program to really put our rural areas, especially those that have had conflict for 50 years, in the 21st century. Bring them from the 19th to the 21st century. There are a couple of millions of Colombians there that if I tell you that poverty average is 30%, those guys are in 45%. They have to be brought to modernity and to the 21st century through a very intensive and long program of intervention in those rural areas. My estimate is that it will take between 1 and 1.5 points of our GDP per year for the next 15 years. That's the size of the program. To do what? For roads, for irrigation, for technological packages, for land for the peasants that were taken brutally from their regions and they want to go back or want to have land to live there, for credit, for modernizing the institutions that really accompany the production in the rural areas of any country. We have to do that anyway. If FARC finally accepts a deal to end the conflict, it will be faster, it will be less expensive, and it will be of great satisfaction, let's say, for everybody. If they finally don't get to an agreement in the peace process, we have to develop that program anyway. Because, again, if we want to become a developed country, you cannot have several millions of Colombians that are so far from the modern reality that urban areas and most of the rural areas have. So that first agreement on rural development is very important for the future, with or without FARC. I hope with FARC. Second, political participation. FARC thought that there was a chapter where the government and the organization will agree what should be changed in the political model of Colombia. It was not so. What we agreed was, when you become a political party unarmed, you come to the table with the other actors of the Colombian democracy and you agree what the reforms are going to be. The modernization of the opposition statute, the modernization of the electoral system, the modernization of the way citizens participate in the local policy of mayors, governors, and things like that. And fourth point, very important for Colombian history and future, yes, the security of people that do politics in Colombia. We have had bad experiences in the past. For everybody, for FARC, for the liberals, for the conservatives, for Polo, for the left, for the right, everybody has been under threat for doing politics in Colombia in the last century. So the new Colombia has to have mechanisms to guarantee that if you decide to go to politics unarmed, you're going to be alive and well, dynamic, in equal conditions on financing, on access to media, etc. That's point number 2 of the agenda. As you probably see, it's also a program that has to be done with or without FARC. We have agreed to do it with FARC sitting at the table with the rest of the Colombian political parties. Those are the 2 agreements we have as we speak. What's left? The hardest part. We currently are negotiating drug trafficking and illicit crops. The question to that item is, are you FARC ready to cut any tie with organized crime? Yes or no? To become a political party unarmed? We will see what the answer is in the next weeks. If the answer is yes, we will have moved forward really with a leap. Really with a leap. Some say no, but they're going to say yes, but they will remain there. Yes. What proportion? We'll see. 10% will remain in drug trafficking, 20%? Well, 90 or 80% is good to me. The difference is that that part of organized crime, if one part of FARC decides to remain there, is a police problem. It's not a problem of international law or international politics. It's people that break the law that have to be pursued. And the rest of FARC will come to politics, yes, of course, in terms of equality with the rest of the actors. What could come out from that talk on illicit crops? Imagine a program. Imagine one day a press conference in Havana where the head of FARC, the FARC delegation, Iván Márquez, and the head of the government delegation, De La Calle, say we have reached an agreement to eradicate the coca crops in the next 2 years. That would be world news. Why we can't eradicate at a speed that is touchable, tangible? Because every time you go to eradicate, you have to put into working a military plan to occupy those 5 hectares. You have FARC shooting outside, drug traffickers shooting outside, mines that will cut your legs or your arms for 5 hectares. If we have not the support, but not the interference of FARC for eradication of coca crops, I'm sure we can reach a coca-free Colombia. And the peasants that are there, they're the ones that suffer really, they can be transformed into agricultural modern producers. With the roads they need, with the commitments for merchandising they need, with the technological packages they need. Not only the eradication and the repression they have felt for so many years. So that could be an outcome in the next weeks. But the rest is even harder. How much justice will accept FARC? How much justice will the public opinion of Colombia will accept? Or the international community, how less justice would they accept? And it's going to be very hard. There, President Santos has said, what we are trying to build in Havana is a peace package. If you ask in this room, individually, would you like to see FARC in Congress? Maybe the answer is 90% no. Would you like to see FARC in jail? Maybe the answer is 90% yes. If you ask individually things like that, you will have a variety of opinions. What we have to build is a package for the public opinion and for the international community that gives pros and cons, but favorable to a final result. Peace in Colombia, a substantial change in the drug market, a new party for the Colombian democracy, and rural progress for several million of Colombians that live in rural areas. You can grow at 6%, at 7% without the conflict, yes. You can improve your education system, of course. It has universal coverage, but it has to improve the quality. You can build the infrastructure, yes, also. But it's going to be very hard because there are very sensitive items inside those questions. For instance, we are the only peace process that is going on after the Treaty of Rome. The International Criminal Court is there, seeing what kind of precedent is going to be our negotiation. If it goes to levels that it could call impunity, or to levels that FARC could call impossible. Imagine a person that has been 35 years in the jungle of the tropics of Colombia with a gun on his shoulder, where the only proposal he has in front is, give me your gun and go to jail 40 years. The answer is, come on, when you get serious, you call me again. But that's the sensitivity of that problem, because on the other side are the victims that say this guy cannot go to jail one day or not go to jail. Where all the processes have found common ground. Truth commissions, pardon, public pardon asked by who took the decisions in the past against victims, to reparate victims, to give guarantees of non-repetition, to disarm in a way that is verifiable, to reintegrate most of their 6,000 or a little more combatants, and have justice applied to those that committed crimes against humanity and that were those that took the decisions in the organization. It's going to be hard. The first reaction of any human is, no, that's unacceptable. But then you move and you start to see that there's no other option. You cannot negotiate the Salvadorian way. You cannot negotiate the North Ireland way anymore. There are some constraints additional that have shown up in the international community that give limits to what we are dealing with in Havana. That make the negotiation even tougher. So, what's my guess? I'm more optimistic today than when we started a year and a half ago. It doesn't mean that peace or peace agreement is around the corner. No, it will take still months. Hopefully we'll reach an agreement, if so, this year. Why? Because, again, I think FARC has no option than negotiate. The hardest part of the newest part of this is that for the first time we are having a peace process and elections at the same time. It was a risk calculated by President Santos. He's taking that risk because, as he says, the most important issue for Colombia today is to end the conflict, to put an end to the conflict, even if re-election is at stake. And that's something that really values a lot more the decision to be at the table. The easiest way of winning an election is that, okay, I suspend the negotiations, let's go to re-election, then I reopen it. No, 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 it's not serious. You have to keep the table as a pressure saying we have to end this conflict. And let me end with this. We have a new Colombia in front of us, that's for sure. We are doing our best to solve the biggest problem for that new Colombia, what is left of the armed conflict. Maybe we will sign an agreement. We cannot commit the same mistake we committed in Central America. Both Colombia and the United States are members of the Contadora group. We thought that the day the treaties were signed, everybody could go home happy. And it has been very expensive, that picture we have 25 years ago. The moment we reach an agreement is where hard things start. That is transforming that piece of paper in a will of the heart of the Colombian society. That piece of paper interprets what the heart of the Colombians wants to see as peace. And it requires a lot of pardon, it requires a lot of tolerance, it requires a lot of economic policies to fight inequality, and it requires open foreign policy. That's the challenge. My guess again is that this is the best moment I've ever seen for my country in my lifetime. But better times are still ahead of us. So now let's open to questions. Thank you very much. If you want, or I can take it directly as you wish. Okay, I'll take it. Madam, please.
According to the United Nations refugees maybe, Colombia has more than 4 million people internally displaced. What is the government planning, or what are they doing now? Because it has increased in the past year. It hasn't.
Well, we have a very close reviewing program with the Supreme Court of Colombia. We have had the first sentences that oblige the government to take certain decisions on desplazados, on displaced people. And we have a committee of follow-up of that. What we have found is that once they are in the program, most of them would like to stay, to remain in the urban areas. But many of them would like to return. So in the program of the first point of agreement with FARC, we have a huge space for land that will be, again, from land that is from the state, from the government, that will be in programs, massive programs for displaced. But as we speak, we have huge programs that really allocate a lot of public resources of the public budget in health, in childcare, in mothers at the head of households, in training, and in programs of return where security has come back. It's, I think, the biggest program in the world for not refugees, but for displaced, internal displaced citizens. I think with the peace agreement, we will have there also half of the solution for those Colombians, mostly for those that want to go back to the rural areas, that, as I said, are not the majority as far as I know.
I guess that my concern was that you have told us how Colombia has improved economically and has been doing very well, and yet this number of displaced people seem to be increasing rather than decreasing. So
the problem is that those that go back are not announced. I mean, what you have is a stock of displaced. When you mentioned 4 million, is what has happened in the last 15 to 17 years, that we have accounts of that. Those that have gone back are not taking out of the accounts. Those of the pockets of violence that come to Bogotá or to Cartagena by the hundreds, they are taken into account. So it's added to the inventory of people. That's why the figures look always bigger. But the truth is that the attention of displaced ordered by the Supreme Court takes a couple of millions. That's a lot of people, a lot of people. We think with the peace process that the real problems of those families could be better solved than the way that is being done today. Because anyway, it's a transition. Any service you can give to those people that need your help, your assistance, is a transition. Even for remaining in Bogotá or in Medellin, or for going back to Cartagena del Chairá. They are in permanent transition, if you want. And that has to be near an end if we reach a peace agreement. It has to be dealt with in the implementation of the peace agreements. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. I was studying in Japan and England. I know they were friendly and warm-hearted, but I think it's important to promote the cooperation between the two countries. And what do you think in the future years you're going to do to attract investment or cultural exchange from both countries? And secondly, it's a personal question. You have plenty experience both in private sectors and public sectors. And what kind of thought make you change your career to public sectors? And why you change it? Or, I'm interested in that.
The second one, I'll let my wife answer that. No, China. Something I missed because of time. I saw the professor's face saying it's time to stop. So we have a great initiative. I think the most important initiative for Latin American integration called the Pacific Alliance. That's a group of 4 countries, Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile, that we have called like-minded countries, not to hurt anyone. It's an open exercise of integration that finally has been built to deal with Asia. We are in the Pacific Rim. We have treaties, bilateral treaties among us. All the 4 of us have treaties with Canada and the United States. Most of us have treaties with Japan, Korea. So the future of that alliance of the Pacific is to put in one piece all the bilateral relations we have with Asia and the United States and Canada. The Alliance of the Pacific is already a market of, I think, $2.5 trillion of GDP and 250 million people. I think through that mechanism, the relations with China and India, of course, and Indonesia, of course, are going to be very much improved in the next years. You would be amazed to find out that China is the 2nd largest economic partner of Colombia, after the United States. We have a trade relationship that is really very, very high and increasing every year. And in investment, we have had several proposals from China that have not been converted into reality because China is starting to learn how to participate in bids. They like government-to-government agreements. And we in Colombia will like bids, people that compete for projects. So that has been hard for China. China has had better programs of investment with countries like Venezuela, like Brazil, where those agreements between governments are more feasible. But I think in the future, the interest of China for countries like Colombia are going to be critical. We are going to become a country that in food and energy will be number 2 or 3 in Latin America. So food and energy for China are key questions. We have a program of students exchange with China that is very small. It's like 50 a year. That's very small. But it's a start. We're very interested in developing our relations with Asia. We have opened like 6 new embassies in Asia in the last 3 years. We are begging for our membership in APEC, but the struggle between India and China has made impossible that APEC receives new members. So we are there in the line. We have number 1, the ticket number 1 to go in. And my personal question. I was the president of the Business Association of Colombia, ANDI, for 18 years. Anything that you do for 18 years except your marriage is boring. Well, that's a question that solves your answer, and I'm still in good terms with my wife.
Hi, my name is Diego Gonzalez. I'm a law student at UC Berkeley, and I'm a lawyer back home. I really would like to ask you 3 questions. The first one is the government, the Colombian government, approaching other actors of the armed conflict over there, I mean the Bahrain and the other guerrillas groups in Colombia? The second question is, some sectors, some people are talking about a new constituent assembly in Colombia after the peace process. Do you see that option as a feasible option, or is that going to happen, or that option is closed? And the third question is pertaining inequality. I think that one of the main sources of the Colombian armed conflict is inequality. So what are the measures that the current government is taking in order to promote I would say, a more equal society in our country?
Good. So you work for CNN now? No. Other actors. Yes. Contacts with ELN are in course. We haven't had the official poll, like, as we say in F1 races, but it will come. It will come in the next weeks. As other groups are concerned, the position of the government is that those groups are common criminals. I mean, a common delinquency that has to be fought with all the strength of the government and without negotiation, except the submitment to the justice. There are laws and legislation for that. But a table of negotiations with Bahrain, you will never see that. That's what I have received as instruction from the President Santos when we started the negotiations. That's something else. It's a police problem that we have to solve. By the way, my guess, Professor, is that the biggest threat for democracy in the future is not going to be terrorists. It's going to be organized crime. The way it is growing in the world is something that, now that Colombia has won victory on organized crime, we see how strong it was and how strong it was going to become if we didn't do that. The same thing that Mexico is facing today. It's not a question of 2 or 3 drug dealers. It's a question of the world organized crime trying to maintain its influence in Mexico or in Colombia. So I say this because negotiation cannot be an option with organized crime. We are giving cooperation to Central America and Mexico, as Colombia, to fight organized crime. We have trained 20,000 public servants in Mexico and Central America to fight that. So yes, to those that have still some political personality, that's ELN, that's all. For the rest, they will find our armed forces. Constitutional Assembly, the answer is simple, no. No as part of the peace process. It's an option in the Constitution for the future. There are procedures for that, majorities for that, and results for that. But not as part of the peace process. No way. because what we are dealing with is not, again, the transformation of the Colombian constitution. It's the end of the conflict. And then start a period of peace and modernity that I don't know what could bring to the table. But una asamblea constituyente is part of the peace process. I don't think so. Inequality. I think Colombia has done more than any other Latin American countries, including Brazil, in the last years. We moved from a Gini of 0.58 to 0.54. And we've had cities like Bucaramanga with 0.48, even lower than many cities in the United States. It's still high. We have to go to 0.3, and it takes more growth, but it takes also explicit policies to intervene the causes of inequality. That's mainly housing, infrastructure, access to public services, and education. But we're moving for the first time in many years, I would say in 200 years, in the right direction. Coming down from 0.59, 58 to 0.54, and cities in 0.48, 49. We have brought down poverty from 60 to 30%. That's a very good beginning for equality. For the first time, and it's very interesting, a subproduct of the FTA with the United States that nobody mentions, but I feel very proud of that, is that the labor chapter of the FTA produced, for the first time in our history, more jobs in the formal sector than in the informal sector. The last data that brought the DANE out day before yesterday, the formal jobs grew like 3.5 times faster than the informal jobs, and the total of formal jobs is bigger than the informal jobs. For the first time, that's also the way to fight inequality. And the third source is rural, between the urban world and the rural world. That's the program I described that I think if we can put an end to the conflict, will be the real revolution for fighting inequality in Colombia. Madam, please.
Thank you. My name is Adriana Camacho. And how much, if any, are women involved in this dialogue? When I say women, I ask about grandmothers, mothers, daughters, that they are the ones victims of the conflict.
Well, I have to make a distinction there. Women, we have 2 women, full negotiators in the team. 2 women, one Afro-Colombian and one, this is Vice Minister of the Interior, the brilliant ones. They are at the table. One of them replaced my seat in Havana. So women are there. The second part is victims. Victims are not only women. Victims are women, men, children, old people, soldiers. So for victims, there's a big chapter in the negotiation. How to deal with it has been very hard with FARC. FARC wouldn't like to see the victims yelling at them and incriminating them. And most of the people would like to see victims active, saying, yes, you did this and this and this to me. It has international procedures that we have not reached yet in the table, but that FARC will have to understand they have to take them. The treatment of the victims of the conflict is the key for peace. Not for the signature of the agreement, no, for peace. If you don't deal with that deeply until it hurts, like charity. Charity starts when it hurts. The treatment of the victims is correct when it hurts. Hurts the one and the other. There's place for pardon immediately. There's room for pardon. Because I've always said, as I said at the end of my intervention, pardon is a part that Colombia has to ask itself. Are we able to pardon ones and others, FARC and military, policemen and ex-mayors of Cartagena del Cheira, students and people, the mothers of those that were kidnapped in the last 25 years? Can we pardon that? If we can, that's a start for peace. If we cannot, we will see a cycle again of violence in the future. Even if we have a treaty signed with FARC. And the key of that solution, of that knot, is victims, the word. Victims. And we always said at the table, and say at the table, the way you treat the victims, FARC, the way you treat the victims is the key for peace. We're not there yet. It's the next point of the agenda when we get rid of the things of illicit crops and drug trafficking.
It will be great, it will be great if women from all the sizes are together, and they will show all the faces in Colombia. FARC grandmothers that have been victims of the violence, like otherwise the victims of the...
Yes, ma'am. There are some initiatives in that. Angelino Garzón has led some initiatives in that. The United Nations have led also some initiatives. What we have to do is, when we get to that point, put everything together and see what do we do. Go to Havana or not, deal with it in Bogotá or not. Time will be for that. In the next months, it is not going to be for the next years, no, but the next months you will see. And if you have ideas on that, I'll be more than glad to receive them. Sir.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador.
Can you identify yourself, please?
I'm Jose Maria Alban. I'm from Bogotá, Colombia. First of all, thank you for being here. The fact that Colombia appointed such an ambassador as yourself towards the United States speaks a lot about how Colombia views relations with the United States and its commitment to the peace process. And now I have a question for you. You're a victim yourself and your family from conflicts. And after what happened, and the fact that you can be able to sit with the victimaries from yourself and your family speaks greatly about yourself. What would you say to all these people that are not able to pardon the other side of the conflict and who are not willing to advance in this peace process?
Thank you for the question. That's a subject I never touch by my own initiative because it doesn't adorn. But when people ask me about that, I have a few things to say. First, when President Santos invited me to the team, he very kindly said, "Do you think you have any impeachment because of your daughter being kidnapped by FARC 2000? And my answer was, Mr. President, the easy way of getting out of this is saying, yes, I'm impeached. And everybody will understand why Mr. Villegas is not in the team. Who could blame that? But then with my wife, we suddenly said, no, the message has to be that even if you have a scar, even if it hurts when you see your counterpart at the table, the message is that there's room for pardon. It's the only way peace is feasible, is possible in Colombia. Because we all have our pains. The pain of kidnapping is something you cannot imagine unless you have been close to it. What I can say personally is that kidnapping of a kid, of your kid, is even worse than death. Because with death you have certainties and sadness, but with kidnapping you have sadness and uncertainty. That's it. I was there, I'm still there. When FARC said once on the table, what victims? We have no victims. I said, look at me. Remember me? You have one here. It's useful to remind people that there are victims, that we have in our hearts pain, but that we have in our hearts room to pardon. Not to forget, it's unforgettable, but to pardon. So I hope our decision brings to other people the same feeling, that the well-being of our kids, of our great children, of the Colombians of 100 years from now on, deserve the sacrifice of pardoning, having room for pardon. Yeah. It's your marching orders, Professor.
Thank you. we've just started the discussion, so thank you very much.
1 hour and a quarter.
And thank you all for coming. We look forward to seeing you at future events. We look forward to seeing you back at Berkeley.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.